Hello, everybody. Welcome to Soul Sessions. My name is Sabrina Rising. If you're new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I typically host a broadcast on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. called Oracle Hour. Tonight is a different format. Tonight, I'm going to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to me. I have clients and participants reach out to me during the week and they submit topics that they would like me to discuss on. And so that's what I'm going to do tonight. We're going to talk about love and relationships and intimacy. And I will take live questions in the chat, and I will also take live coaching requests. So if you are someone who is struggling in your personal relationship, if relationships are an ongoing issue for you, if you keep dating the same person, or you're struggling to find love, then I can help you. There is probably nuggets of gold in tonight's talk for you. And if you want to come and join me on screen, you're welcome to. I have my trusted moderator here. Hello. Hi, we joined. Nice to see you. Hi, Steffi. Nice to see you here as well. Thank you for all my community members, those of you that are watching live, those of you that are here with us. And if you're watching the replay, you can always post questions in the comment sections and I'll get to those at some point. So we are streaming in 3 places. We're streaming on Facebook and on Instagram. You can see me, but I cannot see you. So if you just want to watch, that's cool. But if you want to interact and ask questions and come be part of the community, then join us at Sabrina Rising live on YouTube. Okay, great. So let's get into our topic for tonight. I felt very called. Of course, I had a lot of requests, and I think it's perfect timing to talk about love and personal relationships. So we'll start with this idea of love. How do human beings come to learn about love? Right? We learn from love in our early childhood environment. Right? If you've been watching some of my videos, you've probably heard me say this so many times already. We learn everything about our identity, everything about being human, everything about how to operate as a human from our early childhood environment. And so our caregivers model this love relationship. Okay, they model, what love feels like, how they interact with each other. If you are in a single parent relationship, same. You're going to see how that single parent, modeled relationships for you, perhaps in different ways, perhaps with friendships or with extended family, and so on. So relationships are modeled for us as children, and this is how we learn. Hi, Jolie. Hi, everybody. Hi, thanks for being here. So relationships are modeled for us in early childhood. And it's very important to sort of set the tone for what we're talking about, because in early childhood, between the ages of 0 to 8, roughly, human beings are in what's called theta wave brain state. Okay, and so this can be likened to a state of hypnosis. There's no ego present. There's no filter present to accept or deny the messages that we're receiving. We're just accepting everything as true, right? So I'm seeing these relationships being modeled for me, and I'm also seeing that how my parents relate to me. So the way that our parents related to us, or caregivers, whoever it was that raised you, is the way you learn to relate to yourself. So if mom approves of me, then hi Canada, greetings. If mom approves of me, then I approve of myself. Right? If dad thinks I'm misbehaving, or he's disappointed with me, then I internalize that and I make that mean something about me, right? And now I learn to disapprove of myself. Does that make sense? And so, the way that our parents relate to us in whatever they emphasized, whatever they put, focus on, whatever they celebrated, whatever they criticized, or whatever disappointed them, are ways that I'm going to learn to love and celebrate myself, and also criticize and feel disappointed with myself. So this mirror image of self is created by the what is being shown to us, what is being demonstrated by our parents. Okay, so again, the way our parents relate to us is, hi, Miss Makaya, nice to see you here. Hi, Shiloh. Hello. Thank you for joining me. So again, the way our parents relate to us is the way we learn to relate to ourselves, and we don't know anything different, because this is the environment that we're in, right? And so relationship with self is formed. I decide during these early childhood formative years, during this theta wave brain state, conditioning process, I decide who I am, who I can be, what I can have, what life is going to be like, what love is going to be like for me, what relationships are like, what love is supposed to feel like, what's, again, by the example that I'm seeing and what I'm absorbing in my early childhood environment. And there's an emotional tone in our early childhood environment that creates kind of a set point in terms of what feels normal to us. Okay. So that emotional tone, hi, Bo, that emotional tone will ultimately be our default setting. Okay, this goes right into our unconscious. And I mentioned earlier in the video, just announcing tonight's broadcast, that our relationships are very much a byproduct of what we're choosing consciously and also unconsciously. Right. So what does that mean? It means during this conditioning phase that I'm describing now, our unconscious mind is being programmed. This is where our deep held values and beliefs about our self-worth, who we are, what we can have, what we cannot have, as I mentioned, are stored. And until we challenge these deeper beliefs, we're really not aware of some of the things that we are attracted to or attracting to us, manifesting, creating, triggered by, right? These are all reactive things. And we very much operate in reaction until we can take 100% responsibility for our conditioning, for our beliefs, and for all of the ways in which we established our identity in this early childhood phase. Okay, so relationship with self gets created in early childhood. This is where I come to know who I am, or I come to understand myself based on my caregiver environment. Okay, now oftentimes, and this is, for anybody who hasn't done any real inner child work, we're not, like I mentioned, we're not really aware of what's residing in our unconscious. Some of the pain that we're still holding on to, the limiting beliefs that are keeping us trapped in patterns that don't feel good, that can be self-destructive because of the way that we were raised. Okay, so if this is you, you're not alone. So many of us in early childhood did not get our emotional needs met. So many of us were abandoned. So many of us were not treated with love and respect and kindness and compassion, from our caregivers. And because of that, as a child, because a child doesn't have the cognitive development to understand, oh, this is that person's issue and it's got nothing to do with me, we internalize this behavior, right? We make it mean something about who we are, about what we're worth, and about what we can and cannot have. Okay, and this stays, solidified. It's anchored into our belief system, and we grow up, we become adults, we go out in the world, we try to have relationships with all of this conditioning in place. And what we're doing when we're trying to have these adult relationships is we're playing out whatever's in our subconscious mind. Right? We're going to play out these dynamics because on a soul level, we're trying to work out our childhood pain. So if you're someone who hasn't done inner child work, or you haven't really looked at your limiting beliefs or patterns, you haven't looked at some of your destructive behaviors, some of your tendencies in relationships, you're going to see the same type of relationship show up over and over and over again in your life. You're going to suffer in the same way. Even if you date a different person, comes in a different package, looks totally different, acts completely different than the last person, you swear this relationship is going to be different. And yet there you are. Once there's an emotional bond that solidifies in that relationship, all of those early childhood triggers start to show up. Right. And this happens every time. Okay. So this is where now we start to see, and usually for many of us, it's after several difficult, relationships and heartache that we come to inner work, and we come to say, okay, I want to heal something within me. I see that I'm, engaging in these patterns, and I want to do something about it. I want to take 100% responsibility for how I'm showing up in relationship. Okay. Hi, Jules. Nice to see you here. Good. Beautiful. Oh, I hope somebody's going to come on for live coaching soon. Okay. So as I'm describing this topic, we're talking about, the relationship with self and how the relationship with self gets projected onto our relationship with other people. So as a child with unmet needs, we're going to just assume that most of us have unmet needs from early childhood. We're going to seek out to have those needs met by other people, because as children, our parents fail to meet all of our emotional needs. They fail to meet perhaps some of our physical needs. And so until we learn to do the work to take 100% responsibility for the quality of our experience, we're always going to have the expectation that someone else meet those needs for us. This is human nature. Okay. We're always going to want to lean into sources of external validation and comfort and support and reassurance to fill our cup, because we don't have the coping skills to do that for ourselves. Okay. And so coming out of early childhood conditioning, again, with imprints in place, with limiting beliefs in place, or whatever trauma happened in your early childhood that is keeping you stuck in whether it's low self-worth, low self-esteem, or abusive relationships. Again, it really depends on the childhood that you had. Okay. But take a moment as I'm talking to reflect on what your childhood was like. If there was a lot of chaos, for example, you might have chaotic relationships, or you might have a chaotic relationship with yourself, right? If there was a lot of abuse in your childhood, you would develop an abusive relationship with yourself, with your body, perhaps, and then engage in abusive relationships with other people. So this is how everything reflects everything. Parents treat us in a certain way. We learn to treat ourselves in that way, relate to ourselves in that way, and then we learn to relate to others in the exact same way, whether we're conscious of it or not. And most often, especially for engaging in relationships that don't meet our needs, it's because we're not conscious of what those needs are. Okay. And how can we be? How is it possible to be conscious of your needs if you haven't really taken a good look at yourself, if you haven't done the inner child work to examine what needs were met in childhood, what needs were unmet, and what needs are you still trying to have met outside of you? Okay. And so this is a very, very, very important body of work. When we look at the relationship with mother, for example, we look at, mother represents everything that vibrates feminine, how we nurture ourselves, the relationship to body, to food, to aesthetics, to self-care, to flow, to intuition, to the formless, right? This is all feminine energy. Mother will dictate those dynamics for us in terms of how we related to mother, right? Those are the same dynamics we're going to establish with everything that vibrates feminine. Father, the way we relate to father will determine our dynamic with everything that vibrates masculine, right? So look at your relationship with your dad. Was it painful? Was he there for you? Was he not there for you? Was he critical? Was he, supportive? Whatever the relationship was, this is not about evaluating whether it was good or bad. We just want to look at, what was I conditioned with? Was it, did it feel good or did it not feel good? Was I afraid? Was I tense? Was I anxious? Ultimately, there's really two experiences that we can have. We can either feel scared or we can feel safe in early childhood. And for so many of us, in the ways that we did not feel safe, we learned to cope based on survival. Right. And so in order to come out of survival mode, so we can have happy, healthy relationships, we need to learn how to come out of fear. We can only do that by learning how to cope with fear and how to fill our own cup. Okay. And for this, we need awareness. Awareness is the first step to overcoming our early childhood trauma, or, limiting beliefs, conditioned beliefs and conditioned self that is trying to have happy, healthy relationships today. Okay. And so you might notice, especially if you're someone who's in partnership and you're struggling with certain issues, perhaps you're afraid of, advocating for your needs, or you're afraid of asking for help, or you're afraid of saying no, or setting a boundary, right? Whatever it is in your relationship that's causing you stress and anxiety I can draw a straight line right back to your childhood. Hi, BJ. Nice to see you. I hope your day's going well too. When you look at whatever it is that you're struggling with in your relationships, it can be directed right back to some event in childhood or some repetitive situation in your early childhood environment where you felt that way. Right. And so this is what And like I talked about, we all have an emotional set point. This creates the default. This is what feels normal. Even if the conscious mind, for example, we're aware that we want, a loving, happy, affectionate, healthy, reciprocal love with somebody. So we set up to find that on a conscious level because the reasoning mind is aware enough to know that this is what I'm looking for. But if the unconscious mind hasn't been looked at and dealt with and healed, you may not necessarily be attracted to that. You might be attracted to someone who is, in fact, you are 100% going to be attracted to someone who's going to trigger your wounds. Why is that? Why are we attracted to people that will, push our buttons and recreate some of that early childhood traumatic experience for us? Because First of all, we have, as I mentioned, an emotional set point. This is what feels normal. This is what we know, right? Because we haven't changed, we haven't shifted that yet. And also on a soul level, we want to heal, right? We want to be able to deal with this head on. And because I firmly believe we live in a benevolent universe, the universe is always giving us exactly what we need so that we can heal, so that we can evolve. The trigger is a gift, right? That point of pain or that point of pressure in a relationship where it feels unpleasant or it feels painful is always an opportunity to say, okay, how, where is this pain coming from and how can I take responsibility for it so that I can get out of this pattern and I can learn to heal myself. Right. So early childhood conditioning really sets the stage for everything in life. It really does. And I talk about this in my one-to-one programs, in my self-realization experience. I teach this on a very intimate level where we dive deep into your own childhood conditioning, specifically what it was like for you. And we see how this really sets us up for life, not just relationships, but relationship with money, with sex, with food, with the world, with structures, with authority, with our self-worth. And ultimately, it creates our entire identity. Okay. But tonight we're talking specifically about love and relationships. And the way we love ourselves is ultimately how we're capable of loving other people. It's not just the conscious love that you're capable of giving, but it's the unconscious wounding that you're bringing to your love relationships that's also showing up, that's also limiting your capacity for love, or perhaps putting too much pressure and too many demands on the relationship that you're in. So if a person who has not looked at their unconscious wounding, hasn't done the inner child work, is not capable of or aware enough. We're all capable, but we don't have the awareness to say, okay, well, these are some of my wounds, and these are some of my triggers. And so when I feel triggered, then this will likely happen, right? When we go into a relationship with this level of awareness, chances are, we're going to get triggered and we're going to blame our partner and we're going to make our partners responsible for our pain, right? Just like we did as children. Right? When you were upset about something, it was mom's fault or dad's fault, or perhaps your sister's fault or somebody else's fault. It was always because of someone else or because of something happening outside of you. This is normal in childhood, right? But we never come out of this phase until we stop and actually take personal responsibility for the quality of our experience. So now I want to go into my loving relationship and I want to be responsible for my own feelings. Right? This doesn't mean that your partner is not accountable to you to treat you with respect or kindness or compassion or love, and vice versa. You're still accountable to each other, but you're not responsible for each other's pain. You're really not. And I know this could be triggering for some of you that are listening, that are in relationship, that are perhaps struggling in your relationships. You're not responsible for your partner's pain. In fact, what you're doing is mirroring back to your partner, and your partner is mirroring back to you some area where you're still holding pain from your childhood that needs to heal, right? Through self-awareness, self-compassion, and just really learning to love yourself unconditionally, right? Removing all the judgments from whatever your needs are. Okay. It's amazing how many people, and I've encountered this over and over again in my coaching programs, are not even aware of what their needs are. Right? We're not aware that we have a need for space, or we have a need for sovereignty. We have a need for connection, integrity. We have a need for reciprocity. We have a need for perhaps clear communication, just basic things. And when we're not looking at our relationship needs from, this idea of it's okay for me to have these needs, it's okay for me to have needs that are rooted in just my fundamental value system and what I need in order to feel safe in a relationship, right? Safety is also a need, right? We have a need to feel safe in our relationships. And so when we're not aware of what our needs are and we're not advocating for them, we're projecting onto our partners the assumption that they know us, see us, and will hopefully behave the way that we want them to. This is insane, right? It's like trying to drive with your eyes closed. We need a navigation system. We need a map to our inner life, and we can only obtain that once we do the inner work to understand what our deeper needs are and how to share them, how to advocate for them in ways that are, that are nonviolent, in ways that are compassionate and empathetic. Hello, Deborah. Nice to see you here. So when we're able to communicate those needs, then we can invite people into relationship with us, into conscious partnership with us, where we're co-creating something that works for everybody. Okay, this is the magic. If you are in a loving relationship and you're struggling with your partner and you don't feel safe, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, perhaps you don't feel appreciated, or perhaps you struggle with anxiety. You're afraid of being abandoned. You're afraid of, all these bad things happening in your relationship. There is some wounding there. That points to your inner child work that needs to really be looked at, and taking responsibility for that instead of projecting it out onto your partner. Your partner cannot save you from your early childhood trauma. Only you can do that. Only you can do that by saying, by being, first of all, being transparent, saying, I have these feelings, I have these fears, I don't know why, and this is how I was raised. This is my relationship with my father, this is my relationship with my mother. Let me take a look at these relationships, and say, this is what I'm feeling. And I teach this, especially with couples and in all, relationship dynamics. When we advocate for our needs, we're basically saying, hey, I have this feeling because it's attached to this particular need, right? So a feeling is always attached to a need. You don't get scared randomly, right? We're not afraid of being abandoned, all of a sudden in a relationship because we're dating a particular man or a particular woman. The fear of abandonment's been there since childhood. And so this particular man or particular woman will come along and will trigger this wound that will bring up the abandonment, because number one, you're ready to heal it. And this person is mirroring back to you the wound that needs to be taken care of. And you're responsible for it. Right? You actually, every single one of us has the power to lead ourselves out of suffering with awareness, with willingness, and with some emotional maturity. Right? And so if you're making your partner responsible for your pain, it's not your fault. It's just you don't know any better. Right? You perhaps don't even realize that you're doing it. Right? Unless you've communicated something very clearly with your partner and you have an agreement in place where you both agree to operate in a certain way, there's no accountability. The partner is not responsible to show up for you in any particular way other than, the basic necessity for safety and respect and compassion and kindness and whatever values you have established in your relationship. Okay. So, we have more people joining us. Hi, everybody. So to summarize, and I want to take some questions and I want to take some coaching for anybody who wants to come on and do some live soul seat coaching with me tonight. You're so welcome to join me on screen. My moderator, Darius, is here with us tonight, and he is going to post a link for anybody who wants to come on. And there it is. All right, beautiful. So here's the link. If you want soul seed coaching, follow this link. You just click on it and come and join us, and I will coach you live. Whatever your relationship situation is, if you're in a marriage, if you're, dealing with, if you're struggling, or if you're looking to find love, this is one thing I'd like to address as well. If you are, someone who struggles to find partnership, or if partnership seems to elude you, it can simply be because, again, we look at early childhood conditioning, we look at the beliefs that were established in early childhood, and, what is it that you believe about yourself, about your own lovability, about, about whether or not love is accessible to you, whether or not it's safe to love, whether or not it is, there's someone out there for you. You want to start to examine some of your beliefs about love, both consciously and unconsciously. How do we examine our unconscious beliefs? I'll answer that question, and then we'll take some questions from the chat. There's 3 different ways to examine our unconscious beliefs, and that's through our reactions. Our reactions is what triggers us, and it's what we're manifesting into our lives. So what we're creating, right? Look at what you're attracting into your life. And then there's the dreamscape. So what we're dreaming at night. These are 3 different areas, vastly different, but connected, where we can observe what's happening for ourselves on an unconscious level. Okay, so you want to start to maybe take some notes or take a look at this for yourself if you're listening to this conversation live or you're watching the replay. Where am I scared? Where am I tense? Where am I angry? Where am I feeling unmet? Where am I feeling unworthy? Where am I feeling down on myself? Where's my self-esteem could use some improvement? Okay. Hi, Rhonda. Nice to see you. So I want everyone to sort of take a good hard look at this and within your own life and say, okay, so if I say that I want loving partnership, but I have I also have these other beliefs in place, right? So something has to give, right? In order for us to be able to attract into our lives the love that we're deeply seeking, we must be able to embody that love within ourselves. We must be able to examine our beliefs, to feel the pain of whatever happened in childhood, and to be able to release that pain and integrate it and move on from it, accept it, eventually forgive it when it feels appropriate and accessible to do so, so that you can move on, and with the understanding that what happened to you in childhood is not your fault, but it's your responsibility to heal from it. Okay. And when we do that work, we're able to attract a different type of relationship. Until we do that work, all we're really attracting are people who mirror back to us our childhood experience, as I mentioned in the beginning. Okay. I'm repeating it another time, just so it really lands for you. And it's very, very clear. It's basically we are reliving the pain of childhood until we consciously take responsibility for our own conditioning, establish new beliefs, establish a new healthy, loving relationship with self. We can do that in so many ways, right? We can do that on a physical level by taking care of our bodies, by making healthy choices, by doing the things that we need to do to stay well. So there's the physical responsibility that we're taking. The emotional responsibility is by learning to feel, right? Not being afraid of our feelings. Hi, Kelly. Not being afraid of our feelings, not being afraid of expressing our feelings. You're not trying to numb or change or fix or judge ourselves for having the feelings that we're feeling, but really just embracing all of our emotions with compassion and non-judgment and acceptance. This is how we increase our emotional maturity. This is also how we increase our capacity for empathy, right? We learn to be empathetic with ourselves. We can extend that empathy to others as well, okay? And this is very, very important. Empathy is a learned skill. It's literally being able to feel what another person is feeling. How are we going to do that if we're not willing to feel our own emotions? Okay. So it's very important to address our emotional needs and then examining our beliefs, right? What we believe, how we talk to ourselves, what we say to other people about love, about our capacity to love, about whether or not love is possible for us or how love is supposed to unfold. Okay. So it's very important to step into an empowering context in all of these areas and really embody this softness, this loving way of being with ourselves. For so many of us, so many of us that had difficult childhoods, this can be a very tall order, right? But it's doable. Anybody can heal. Anybody can heal from even the most horrific of circumstances by gently and slowly coming into relationship with self, loving relationship with self, even if it starts with just, being able to love a few things unconditionally, and that eventually develops into a bigger capacity to love ourselves unconditionally. And as we learn to love ourselves fully, then we're attracting a different type of partnership into our lives, and we're able to create healthier dynamics with the partners that we already have. Perhaps you're in a relationship that's toxic currently, or that's not meeting your needs, and you're watching this video, or you're doing some inner work, and you're making a decision to take responsibility for how you're showing up now, for the kind of love that you want to create. You might find one of two things will happen. You will either stop being attracted to the person that you're with, or the person that you're with will all of a sudden become curious and be drawn into the work that you're doing and will rise up to meet you there. Okay, so it's never too late to oh, thank you for posting that there. Yes, I appreciate it. So it's never too late to really work on this and to commit to having the love that you want by first committing to loving yourself, and then committing to bringing that love into your relationships. Okay, so beautiful. Thank you everybody for joining me for this topic. Do we have any questions in the chat? Let's see. Any questions? Here we go. Hi, Jolie. Hi. Hello. Wonderful. Any questions from anybody in the chat? Who wants to come on and join me live for some soul seed coaching? See who has the courage to come on here. Hi, Shiloh. You're welcome. Okay, no questions about love and relationships. Okay, I will keep going. If you change your mind and you have questions about whatever it is you might be struggling with in your life, it can be a relationship with self, it can be a relationship with a significant other, it can be a relationship with a child. Perhaps you're a parent, or it could be a relationship with a coworker. Steffi says, "Wise input. You had shared that I should work on resentment, and I feel I have been doing so, but I've been very tired. Need some deep quiet again. Would love your intuitive input on this." Okay, good. Yeah, I would love to give you my intuitive input. Thank you, Steffi, for stepping up. I appreciate you. So working on resentments is the one way to heal the relationship that you're in. So if you're a person who is in a relationship where it's not meeting your needs, if it feels hostile or it feels toxic, or it just feels like, there's an antagonistic environment, chances are, and this is very normal for even, I would say, all relationships have a tendency to accumulate resentments. Okay. So resentments is basically a way to it builds a wall in your dynamic, and it keeps you apart from the other person if we're not addressing it. So I would recommend doing a grievance clearing conversation on a regular basis with your partner, and just being able to sit down and sort of work through some things that have upset you, and be able to communicate those in nonviolent ways so that you can heal the resentment in your relationship. If the resentment's been accumulated over an extended period of time, and you feel like you have a list that's a mile long, to the point where you feel like you want to eject yourself from the relationship, you've got a lot of accumulated anger. Here's the thing, that underneath all of that anger, there is love. There is always love. And there is always an opportunity to heal the dynamic, even if you choose not to stay in the relationship. We can choose to leave relationships not out of resentment, but simply out of love for ourselves and love for the other person, and a recognition that the relationship is no longer offering an opportunity for evolution, for growth, for expansion, or for co-creation. Okay. So, and if you know that you're not getting your needs met in this relationship, then, and you've tried, there's really just no way to get your needs met. That would be, that would sort of be the culmination point of saying, okay, it's time to move on. Okay. But to answer your question directly, Steph, if you're feeling tired, and if you're feeling like you don't have the energy to really put time into your relationship, you can have a conversation with your spouse, and, just explain where you're at, explain that there's a lot of resentment there, that you're aware of a lot of resentment. That's the first step. That's already huge, right? Most people are acting out their resentments. They're lashing out at their partners, or they're taking, they're, perhaps behaving in destructive ways, or ways that are damaging the partnership. So if you're aware of your resentments, that's already a big awareness. And just being able to communicate that with your partner and say, okay, I'm feeling a lot of resentment. I'm trying to write it all out so I can get a clear idea of the grievances that I have, and when I'm ready, I would like to communicate these with you. Okay. So there's no rush, there's no urgency, but just being in that transparency, just being in that transparent dialogue with your partner, and sharing how you feel and where you're at, is already beneficial. It's already creating some type of, healing effect in your relationship. Your partner may not enjoy hearing that, but it's better to hear that a person is struggling in the relationship than to feel it or to experience it directly through unconscious behavior or destructive behavior. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Hi, Kelly. Kelly says, do we have to have our camera on? I am shy. Aw, that's okay. You don't have to join me on screen if you don't want to. You can just ask your question in the chat. Hey, Deborah. Deborah says, okay, I have a question. My partner tells me I am the only woman that has triggered him. Well, I find that hard to believe. Deborah, I find that very hard to believe. I think that here's the thing. Every partner will trigger different wounds, will trigger different aspects of ourselves depending on where we are on our evolutionary journey. So it could be that your partner is somebody who is, for whatever reason, the demands in your relationship, the way the two of you operate together, the whatever drew you to each other is triggering something deeper for him, or something that he hasn't experienced before. That I could believe that he is maybe triggered in a different way than he has been in previous relationships. And that's great. You're welcome is what I would say in terms of, of course, say that with love and compassion. The trigger is an opportunity to take a look at a deeper unmet need. Okay. So where there's a wound, there is pain, which points to an unmet need. Okay. So the feeling of anger or whatever feeling's being triggered, again, a trigger is not a feeling, right? Trigger is just, it's a reaction. I'm in a reaction. So what's the reaction? The reaction is I could be upset. I could be angry. I could be scared. Okay. So what is the unmet need? Okay. It always points to an unmet need. So ask your partner what his need is the moment that he's triggered, so that you can support him in getting his needs met. Okay. The idea is not for you to change who you are, because the way that you're describing this question, when your partner tells you you're the first person that ever triggered him, it's kind of like he's putting the onus on you. Like it's because of you that I'm triggered, but it's actually not. It's because of him. Right. So ask him, I would like to explore the trigger. I would like to explore how you feel. And then what is the deeper need that I can support you in meeting, and see how that works in your relationship. Okay. Good. Thank you for the question. All right. Angela. Angela says, I'm having difficulty dealing with an aging parent. Okay. I try not to engage in tone used to speak to me, but find myself tripping up and not putting up the proper sensors. What other tools can I work on? This is a great question. I love this question, Angela. Thank you for bringing it to the conversation. It can be so challenging, especially because our parents, we love them, we're attached to them. It's very complicated, the relationship with caregiver. There can be love, and there can be resentment, and there can be, frustration, and there can be so many layers to your relationship to this parent. And so, first of all, to have the context that the person that is speaking to you in some way, or whatever's triggering you, is not personal to you. Okay. It takes a sort of ninja level skill. As one of my dear friends always refers to it as, it takes a ninja level awareness to see that, okay, this person is speaking to me in a certain way, and it's triggering something in me. And that trigger is a wound that I have that I'm responsible for. That person, whoever, your aging parent, that doesn't know necessarily that they're pushing this button. They're not doing it necessarily intentionally or maliciously, right? So there's that context to have that, okay, I'm dealing with an aging parent who may or may not be aware of how their words affect me, may or may not be aware of the pain that I'm carrying because of years of accumulated history of unmet needs in this relationship. And so, if you find that it becomes too much, then you have to set a boundary. And I would say this to you, and I would say this to anybody watching live or the replay. This goes for all beings everywhere. Whenever you're in a dynamic that's difficult, that can feel like you're being attacked, or you feel like you're being, there's an emotional threat, you're not feeling emotionally safe, then you have to set a boundary, right? So you go to your maximum capacity, and you can say, I have reached my maximum capacity to support you, and I need to take a break for some self-care. I need to go take some time for myself. There's so many different ways in which we can communicate boundaries in a non-violent way that's loving and that doesn't trigger, the aging parent, and doesn't create some kind of argument. Okay. So the context that there is a person who may not be aware of how they're affecting you, and being able to communicate your unmet needs in ways that are loving. So look at how you react to this aging parent. Is the trigger taking over, right? Is it forcing you to lash out, or is it forcing you to shut down, right? Both of those are reactions. Okay. So lashing out and shutting down are both unhealthy coping skills. What we want to do is take a break. So I would advise you to pause when you're triggered, go take some space for yourself, go do some deep diaphragmatic breathing. I talk about this every live stream I do. Do some deep diaphragmatic breathing, regulate your nervous system, come back to yourself, right? It's very important that you fill your own cup, because the parent is not capable of meeting you there. In fact, this is for everybody. Your parents are not coming for you. Mom is not coming for you. Dad is not coming for you. No one is coming to fill that cup that didn't get filled up in childhood. Okay. Angela says, do I deflect by going silent and not engaging? Deflecting is not a coping skill. Deflecting is a way of avoiding the conversation, right? A coping skill, a coping strategy that's constructive for you is to say, you know what? When you say X, Y, Z, without any kind of value judgment attached to it, just the words, when you say X, Y, Z, I feel sad, I feel hurt, right? And so, and because I can't be in my heart when I'm hurt, I'm going to go take a break, right? So pause and go take a break and sit down and breathe and, feel into your heart. And I do this in my own relationship whenever I'm triggered, like, okay, I can't be in my heart right now. I just need a little space, and I can come back when I can be in my heart and when we can communicate lovingly. Okay. So take some space for yourself. Even if this aging parent doesn't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it, you don't need a participant. You don't need someone who understands you. You just need to be able to set those boundaries for yourself, to be able to walk away, go, breathe, and fill your own cup and remind yourself of who you are and that you're worthy of love, and that, and that you are safe in your own body, and then go back when you can be in your heart and establish the boundaries that you need to establish in order to have a functional dynamic. Again, when we're talking about an aging parent, there can be so many things involved. We talk about, perhaps there is the early onset of like dementia, or the early onset of not being able to, cognitively process things, in the same way, with the same level of sensitivity. Very hard to do alone. Well, and here's the thing. It is work that you must do alone. Right? It is work that you must do alone first, is to take responsibility for your own nervous system and to learn to meet your own to fill your own cup. And when I say that, I mean meet your own needs for love, for empathy. So practicing self-empathy, okay, is the first thing I would do. Angel says, I'm in a similar situation. Angela, it's difficult. It is difficult. Of course it is, because we love our parents and want to be there for them, but we don't want, it's hard if they're being hard on us, if they're not being grateful, if they're being unappreciative. You're not a doormat, right? And I would never advocate for that. I would rather you take space and establish healthy boundaries and learn to say no. And when they are being hurtful, if they are being hurtful, to really understand that it's not personal to you, and to be able to separate that yourself from their behavior. How they're treating you is not a reflection of who you are. It's just a reflection of where they're at, right? And so it's very important to remember that this is a reflection of where the parent is at, and not necessarily true about you, right? So when you take a break, Join says, I love that boundaries are so important. Yes, they are. They're fundamentally important in relationships. Boundaries are an expression of self-care and self-love. And Angela says, thank you for telling me that I am. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. You are worthy of love, and you are worthy of safety, and you are worthy of reciprocity and respect in your relationships. And reminding yourself of that, rather than allowing the aging parent to force you to second guess that because of their behavior. And this sounds like something that's been going on, for a long period of time. There's a sensitive spot to it, rather than being thrown right back into those old wounds, to take responsibility for your needs in that relationship and set those boundaries. So you can say, hey, it's not okay to talk to me that way, or, I actually need to go now because I've reached maximum capacity for being able to, to listen to this, or to be in this type of environment. This doesn't feel safe for me anymore. Okay. And that's how we establish healthy boundaries, without lashing out, without revenge, without being vindictive, without being hurtful in return. Okay. Which is, this is a human response to, especially when someone's being hurtful to us. Okay. Steffi says, yes, I did have the conversation. Thank you for your input that way. And now it's about resting and restoring deeply. Oh, good. Like going away by myself. Thank you for intuitive work. Always on. Beautiful. Yes. Yes, boundaries and space. One of my favorite quotes by Hafiz, and when he talks about relationships, romantic relationships, love relationships, he says, let there be space in your togetherness, so do not make a bond of love. And basically what that means is don't attach to each other to the point where you can't have space, you can't take a break. It's important, especially if you've been in a dynamic that's very enmeshed, or, we're talking to Angela and her aging parent. As well, if you're in a dynamic that's very enmeshed, it's very important to take breaks from it so that you can regroup and you can find yourself and you can establish the relationship with self. Again, the relationship with self is mirroring the relationship you have with everyone else, as we talked about was our topic this evening. Once you're rooted in that relationship with self, then you can come back to whatever dynamic feeling a little better equipped, a little more centered and grounded in yourself so that you can face some of these more difficult conversations head on. Okay. So I wish you luck with that, Steffi. And I acknowledge you for honoring yourself and your needs in your relationship. Hi, Kelly. Kelly says, recently, I have reconnected with my first real boyfriend. Beautiful. And we have connected here and there over the years, but this time feels emotionally closer. Friends or finally more? What do you sense? Okay, good. I knew there was going to be one channeling question that came through tonight. So I'm happy to channel on your behalf. Okay, let's see. Okay, so first of all, this is a past life connection for sure, Kelly. This is someone that you have a very strong soul bond with, okay? And I feel like, yeah, so my sense is that this person wasn't like either available, emotionally available to be fully present with you. Feels like there were some obstacles in the way, even other relationships in the way. But now that you've become closer, and what I like about this situation is that there's a friendship that's been established. So there's already a bond in place. Okay. Which is beautiful. And so, I want you to keep communicating from that place of friendship, because you have this bond in place, it's easier to become aware of what your needs are and to just advocate for them and to not feel the pressure of, when we attract people, this is, like I said, this is a past life relationship, but it feels like a soul mate relationship, which is different than a karmic relationship. Karmic relationship is like there's a strong gravitational pull, you're super attracted to each other, there's this really intense passion, and those relationships are usually hard lessons. They're full of pain and difficult lessons, but they also offer an accelerated opportunity for growth and expansion. Okay, so I feel like this is a soulmate relationship, so it's very gentle unfolding, and I think that as long as you're being clear on what you need and what works for you and how you want this person to show up and how the pace that you'd like to move at, and as long as you feel safe in this relationship, then I feel like this is a really, really good situation for you, Kelly. Okay, so Deborah says, thank you for your truth and wisdom. You are welcome. You're welcome. Let me know how that works out for you. Okay, Deborah? Beautiful. Okay, good. Who is next? Angel says, thank you for telling me that I am. Yes, I will always tell you. My nerves are brittle. Yeah. Well, and that happens, especially, and this is true for Steffi too. When you're taking time away from your relationships that are difficult, where you're having trouble finding your footing and you can't really ground and anchor yourself and your value system and the truth of who you are in a difficult dynamic, taking that space, once you take that space, you'll realize like how much you've been through, how taxing it's been on your nervous system, how difficult it has been. It's kind of like all of a sudden your cortisol levels drop and your adrenaline goes back to normal and you realize how exhausted you are, right? So this is normal. This tells me that there's been a need for boundaries for a really, really long time. And to keep taking that space and using that space, not to ruminate about what you should do in the relationship, but to use that space to really regulate your nervous system and develop a practice where you're feeling, a mind, even just a very basic mindfulness practice would be so beneficial for you. Angela says, I'm afraid it will be a conversation I will have for myself. I'm not sure what you mean. You're right about leaving the scene. Yeah. Good. It's so if you're mean in terms of advocating for your needs or setting boundaries and so on, you get to set the tone. You get to set the tone in all of your relationships in terms of how you want to be treated, how you want to be spoken to, what you will tolerate, what you will take, what you will allow. We get to set the tone. And it's not because it's your parent that you have to just put up with all of it. Okay. So I just want to take the pressure off of you, Angela, and the pressure off of anybody who's in this type of situation. I think Jules had chimed in as well. You're welcome, Angela. Yeah, it's you don't have to take it all because it's your parent. You just, it's important, that we don't lose ourselves in these relationships, and especially if you're not feeling safe, that you're taking responsibility for the boundaries that you need. Okay. Jolie says, hi, Sabrina. Why has it felt so difficult for me to get this new chapter started? I was set in my corporate career and then it all ended. I tried coaching, but I'm turning now to financial and insurance. Okay. Are we talking about the new career chapter? I see. Okay, let me see here. So when you say it all ended, right? I want you to take a look at how you might have co-created that, right? I really want to get you out of this is happening to me thinking, and so coming out of why is this happening to me, and stepping into like how can this be happening for me, right? What is the lesson here? What is the gift? Okay, so the gift is, you co-created the end of that corporate career. Jolie, I just tune into your energy as that you're asking the question. You co-created that because you wanted the freedom, you wanted to be self-expressed, you wanted to be independent, and not work so many hours, and there was a lot of unhappiness in that role. So and I honestly, and I'm going to say this with love and respect, I don't think that you gave the coaching enough time to really, and I understand, of course, financial responsibilities can feel like a lot of pressure. I feel like maybe you don't have a lot of time to wait for things to get off the ground, but I don't feel like you gave it really enough time and energy. Julie says, yes, it was terribly stressful. Yeah. So we're never going back there, right? You're never going back to that job because it was too stressful for you and it's not good for your nervous system and it wasn't happy. What I'm hearing at the source of your question, though, because again, it's never about the circumstances, it's always about our unmet needs. And that's what we're talking about tonight. The circumstances are just pointing to needs that are being met or needs that are being unmet. So your unmet need is the one for safety and security, right? That's what you're expressing, is I want something I want to feel safe and secure and provided for, right? And I think if you just focus on those three things and meditate on those three things, I talked about at the beginning of the broadcast, like looking at our belief system and changing our unconscious beliefs into, beliefs that we can be provided for, that we are safe, right? That we are creating the circumstances that bring up these feelings. Okay. Once you focus on meeting those three needs, you're going to find your footing when it comes to job. And because you're looking for things to make money instead of actually looking for things that bring you joy. Okay. And when we look, Kelly says, thanks so much. This helps me a lot. Yeah, you're welcome, Kelly. Thank you for stopping by. I'm so glad to have you here. Okay, good. So, and this is true for you and true for anybody. Don't do things for the money. Do things, really look at doing things that light you up, that bring you joy, that fill your heart, that, that you feel excited about, right? Start to look into things that that are sort of a natural that you would do for free. Think about, whatever that is. And Julie, I know you have some creative abilities, I know we've channeled for you before. And so there's some creative abilities that you could be expressing. Okay. So really looking at that and giving yourself permission to, Julie says, you're absolutely right. I'm looking for stability and placing that above all else. Okay, good. Beautiful. So so work with me, Julie. Okay. I don't know if you want to come on live. I don't know how much time we have left, but you're welcome to. The link is at the top. Darius, can you post a link for Jolie if she wants to come on for live coaching? If you want to come on for live coaching, Jolie, you can join us here. Otherwise, I'll just keep coaching you. I want you to see that the fundamental need is for safety, right? And so, and because we're not rooted in the belief that we're safe, okay, we're looking externally say, how can I feel safe here? How can I feel safe there? How can I feel safe here? This is how people end up in bad relationships, bad work situations. We make impulsive, wrong choices based on fear and urgency because we're trying to create this feeling of safety. So the first step is to learn how to anchor yourself in feeling safe in your own body. Okay. We can only do this. I'll stick to the chat. Okay. No problem. We can't do this unless we are, really doing the inner work to regulate our nervous system. So as I mentioned already tonight, step 1, become aware of when you're feeling fear and anxious and unsettled and unsafe. Every time that gets triggered for you, you're going to stop. You're going to take some deep diaphragmatic breaths, regulate your nervous system. And you're going to practice, I am safe in my body, I'm safe and provided for. Okay. This is going to take time to change your unconscious beliefs, to rewire your nervous system. Okay. You're literally like asking your whole body to calibrate to a new way of operating. We're changing that emotional set point. We're changing the default, to a new program that says, I'm safe and provided for. When you start feeling safe and provided for within yourself, okay, even just with little examples, you're safe in your home, you're safe in your neighborhood, perhaps you're safe, in your bed, like little examples of feeling safe and provided for. You start focusing on that tangible evidence to help you expand your capacity to really hold safety in the world. You're going to naturally attract opportunities, relationships, situations where you feel safe and provided for. Okay. This is how it works. We have to do, this is, healing from inside out. We have to do the inner work first so that we can create environments where we feel safe, where we're getting our needs met. Okay. So I want you to look at the internal needs first instead of trying to fix the problem. Okay. One of my favorite quotes is, we can't solve the problem with the consciousness that created it. Okay. So we have to be able to raise our awareness and understand what the problem is and go deeper into ourselves. Jolie says, finding safety within myself, so simple yet so challenging. Yeah, it is. And it's challenging because we want someone to make it okay. The inner child says, come save me. Come save me from myself, please. We're waiting for mom. We're waiting for dad. We're waiting for caregiver, anybody to come and throw us a lifeline, an employer, someone to come along and say, it's going to be okay. But that job is yours and you want it to be yours, Jolie. And this goes for you and it goes for anybody. You want the job to lead yourself out of suffering because that's the only way you're going to build true, sustainable safety in your life. If it's coming from outside of you, it will always be, fragile, right? It will never be something that you can really rely on because it can be taken away at any moment, right? We can, imagine, Julie, you get a job tomorrow and you're making great money and everything goes well, and then for whatever reason that company shuts down and you lose your income, and where are you in your relationship to safety, right? So if we constantly are projecting our needs onto outside external circumstances, we never really have any power. Okay. Julie says, oh my God, yes, even with corporate, the money was great, but it was so challenging. So even that wasn't safe. Exactly. So I really want you to look at your need for safety, which points to your childhood. As I mentioned earlier, go back and listen to the beginning of the video and really look at the areas in your life, in your childhood where you didn't feel safe, and see how that's playing out in your life. Right. So, I know just from working with you tonight that, I'm not safe at work. I'm not safe with money. I'm not safe in the world of form. Nothing seems to be working out for me. We're looking at relationship with dad. Okay. Look at relationship with father and the conditioning that happened, that dynamic, what it felt like to be his daughter, what it felt like in that relationship. This is what you're playing out. This is what you're playing out in all these areas of your life that are masculine. Okay. So that's just sort of some insight for you, a journal prompt for you to perhaps work on so that you can start to take responsibility for your own patterning. Okay. The only way to decondition, in my humble opinion, is through awareness, through deep somatic release. So breath work, diaphragmatic breathing is good. A more rigorous breath work practice is also very helpful. It helps release a lot of stuck energy in the body, stuck emotions in the body. And then bringing the healing bomb in, which is the self-compassion, self-empathy, self-care, radical self-care, so that we can bring ourselves into an embodied loving relationship with self. And that embodied loving relationship with self is the foundation for all healthy relationships with everyone in our lives. Okay. Jolie says, yes, I will do that. Work, cultivate safety within myself. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm so happy for you. And Deborah says, I'm ready to work with you so I can stop the pattern. Wonderful, Deborah. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Deborah, we'll post a link here if you want to come and check out my one-to-one programs. There is an opportunity to come and chat with me. You can apply to work with me. Darius, if you can post the link from my website, the one-to-one link. If Darius if you're having trouble finding it, we can just post it at the end. Okay. No worries. But all the links to work with me will be here. We'll post them at the end of this video. And so just some housekeeping things. We've got the mediumship class coming up on Saturday morning. I have 2 spots left for that class. So if you are looking for mediumship connection, you want to connect with a loved one, you want a message from the spirit realm, you want to get complete in that relationship, come join us in the mediumship class this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific. If you want to work with me one-on-one, if you want to explore some of my programs and do some deep inner child work like we've been talking about tonight, you can, thank you, Angela. You can check out the link that I'm going to post here in a moment, and you can book the one-on-one with me. If you want a private reading, if you want an hour of my undivided attention, you're so welcome, Jolie. Thank you for being here tonight. If you want an hour of my undivided attention, you want a reading or a past life regression, there is an opportunity to do that as well in the readings link. And I will be live on Wednesday night at Oracle Hour at 5 p.m. Pacific. Oracle Hour is where I channel and I offer spirit messages. It's a mystical evening of healing and healing all the same like we're doing tonight. Soul sessions will be every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific. So join us and we'll go deeper into these more spiritual topics, relationship topics, inner work topics, and I'll take some live coaching questions in the chat, or you can always join me on screen. Okay. Thank you so much for all of you who attended. It was lovely to be with you all. Steffi says, thank you so much, Sabrina. Have a lovely rest of your week. And for everyone else too, thank you, Steffi, for being part of our community. I just love and appreciate you all so much. All right, great. I will see you soon.